Welcome back to the Remdesivir files. Today we explore the science behind urgency without recklessness. What happens when the world needs treatment now, but the data is still evolving? In episode 5, Emergency Use and Data Thresholds, we are breaking down how drugs like Remdesivir get emergency use authorization, what kind of data is required, and what scientific checks and balances are in place before any green light flashes. Joining us is Saakshi Sharma. Welcome to the show, Saakshi.
Thank you for having me. This is a vital conversation, especially because emergency use often gets misunderstood as skip the rules. In reality, there's a complex, structured decision making framework behind it designed to act fast but also responsibly.
Let's start at the foundation. What exactly is an emergency use authorization, and how is it different from full FDA approval?
Great starting point. An emergency use authorization or EUA is a temporary authorization granted by regulatory bodies like the US FDA during public health emergencies such as pandemics or bioterrorism events. Unlike full approval, which requires extensive phase 1, 2, and 3 data over years, an EUA can be granted based on preliminary but promising data if the product may be effective in diagnosing, treating, or preventing a serious or life threatening disease, or the known and potential benefits outweigh the known and potential risk, and lastly, no adequate, approved, and available alternative exists. The bar isn't as high as full approval, but it's not arbitrary either. The phrase may be effective is critical. There must be scientific justification, not just hope.
Now let's talk endpoints. What types of clinical endpoints are the most influential in an EUA decision, especially for something like remdesivir?
Endpoints are everything. In Remdesivir's case, the primary endpoint that informed its EUA was time to clinical recovery as established in the ACTT1 trial. Why time to recovery? Because in a hospital setting overwhelmed with COVID-19, a shorter recovery time means faster patient turnover, reduced ICU stress, and fewer complications. Even if a treatment doesn't reduce mortality directly, improving functional outcomes can be life-saving at scale. Secondary endpoints can also play a role, like reduction in disease progression, example need for ventilation, or safety outcomes, and exploratory endpoints like viral clearance. But it's the primary endpoint, when statistically significant, that carries the most weight, especially if it demonstrates a clinically meaningful benefit.
You mentioned interim analysis. How do they work in the context of an EUA?
Interim analyses are pre-planned statistical checkpoints built into a clinical trial. They allow data safety monitoring boards, or DSMB, to look at the data before the trial is complete under strict confidentiality. For example, in ACTT1, the DSMB conducted an interim analysis when about 50% of the participants had been enrolled and followed for a minimum period. The results showed a statistically significant improvement in time to recovery. Based on this, the trial was halted early and the data submitted for EUA. But here's the catch. Interim analyses have risk of false positives due to smaller sample sizes, so statistical adjustments like alpha spending are used to control error rates. The goal is to avoid premature conclusions, but in a pandemic, waiting for full data can cost lives. Hence, if the interim benefit is large enough and risk appears manageable, an EUA can proceed.
And what about safety? How much data is considered enough to judge safety for the emergency authorization?
Safety is definitely non-negotiable. For EUA, regulators expect at least preliminary safety data from phase 2 or early phase 3 trials, typically served several hundred patients exposed to the drug. The focus is on serious adverse events, or SAEs, the treatment emergent side effects, organ-specific toxicity, especially liver and kidney in case of antivirals, and any evidence of harm exceeding benefit. For remdesivir, early trials like SIMPLE and ACTT1 reported that most adverse events were manageable, such as transient liver enzyme elevations or infusion related reactions. No major safety red flags emerged, and that paved the way for its EUA. But monitoring doesn't stop post EUA. That's where pharmacovigilance and real world evidence collection step in. EUA comes with strings attached. Companies must submit ongoing data updates or the authorizations can be revoked.
Can you walk us through how regulatory bodies weigh urgency versus incomplete data?
It's a scientific tightrope. On one side, you have public health urgency, thousands dying, hospitals overwhelmed, no proven therapy. On the other side, you have data gaps. So, regulators ask, does this drug show plausible efficacy in early trials? Are the risks manageable based on current safety data? Do we have mechanistic rationale for how it works? Or are there no better options available? For Remdesivir in May 2020, the answers were largely yes. So the FDA issued an EUA for hospitalized patients with severe COVID-19. The key restriction was hospital only use, with monitoring protocols in place.
So once a drug is under EUA, how does it move to full approval?
Full approval or new drug application or NDA approval needs robust efficacy data from large scale controlled trials and complete safety datasets and manufacturing and quality assurance reports, and at last, labeling, pharmacokinetics, and drug-drug interaction profiles. Remdesivir submitted this in October 2020 after ACTT1 completed and additional trial data was in hand. The FDA granted full approval in October 2020, just months after the EUA, a rapid but data-driven transition.
Fascinating. It's clear that even in emergencies, the system is designed to act based on science, not speculation. Thank you, Saakshi, for helping us decode the path from trial to treatment under fire.
Thank you for having me. It's a story of science under pressure and the frameworks built to hold it up.
Next time on the Remdesivir files, we zoom in on the manufacturing of Remdesivir. Until then, stay safe and stay curious.